terrorist violence in Damaturu. The governor notes that the effort to prevent unthought Boko Haram violence must remain sustained and deepen and must necessarily remain an all hands on deck affair. The governor calls on people in Damaturu and across the state to remain calm and resilient, to continue to pray for improved peace and security. And now Justice Ahmed Mohamed of the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has recused himself from hearing the case of convener of Revolution Now protest, Omoyele Sowore. Justice Mohamed, who returned the case file to the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court for reassignment, however, cited allegation of corruption leveled against him by Sowore in 2016 as reason for declining to hear the case.
To do with the liberty of our client, unfortunately, we had no choice in the matter. And all the council agreed that the best thing for his lordship to do, was to recuse himself.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved new appointments in parastatals in the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy. This is in its desire to fast-track the targets and mandate of the ministry, as contained in a statement by its special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina.
The Nigerian Communications Commission (NCC) has Professor Adeolu Akande Southwest, who replaces Senator Olabi Durojaye Southwest as Chairman, Board of Commissioners. Mr. Uche Onwudi Southeast replaces Senator Ifeanyi Godwin Ararumi Southeast as Non-Executive Commissioner. Both are subject to Senate confirmation. In the National Information Technology Development Agency (NITDA), Dr. Abubakar Said replaces Professor Adeolu Akande as Board Chairman. Dr. Habibu Ahmed Imam Northwest replaces Dr. Lawal Bello Moriki Northwest. Dr. Mohammed Saidu Kumo at the Nigerian Postal Service, Dr. Ismail Adebayo Adewusi Southwest replaces Barrister BC Adegbuyi Southwest as Postmaster General and CEO. At Galaxy Backbone Limited (GBB), Professor Muhammad Bello Abubakar replaces Architect Yusuf Kazari, who moves to the Nigerian Communications Satellite Limited to replace Chief Judge Nnadubem Mogalu as Board Chairman. Dr. Najim Salam replaces Honorable Samson Osage as Executive Director of Marketing and Business Development, just as Professor Abdul Jafaru Bambale replaces Kazim Kolawole Raji as Executive Director, Technical Services, and Hadi Mohammed replaces Mohammed Lema Abubakar as Director, Administration.
Nigeria consumes about 2 million tons of poultry meat annually, with 70% of the products smuggled into the country before the closure of the border. The good news now is that the scenario has changed to the advantage of the country following the closure of the border. The Institute of Animal Science has released statistics indicating now that the partial border closure boosts livestock and poultry production in the country.
The border closure has reportedly saved the local poultry industry about 50 billion naira since its commencement in October.
And do you know that air travelers have nothing to fear at the nation's airports this Christmas? This is because additional security measures have been added to guarantee safety and comfort of airlines and passengers, even beyond the Yuletide. Our correspondent visited the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, for an update.
Security situation definitely is better with the screening gates and that nobody is above the law. Everybody screens to get inside, not like in time pass where you go screen, 10 people screening, somebody goes walking.
All the entry points are being manned effectively, and only passenger, of course, bona fide, that which has boarding pass, and the boarding pass has to be valid, that could be allowed down to the foot of aircraft.
The National Orientation Agency is appealing to religious leaders to team up with the security agencies in their battle to win the war against crimes, especially during and after the Yuletide. Director General of the agency, Garba Abari, made the appeal against the backdrop of the period of Yuletide, which comes with a lot of festivities, outdoor activities, and massive movements across the country.
Only today, we began to reach out to the leadership of worshiping congregations, the churches and the mosques, on the need to join in the effort to keep the Yuletide period safe and peaceful. We believe our places of worship should be a platform for communicating essential precautionary measures to citizens as part of our security awareness and sensitization campaign.
And that's the news segment of the Good Morning Nigeria. Jumai and Kiran are ready, but that will be after this break. Stay with us.
20 years of travel and counting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists. Africa reached over 50 million homes, igniting smiles across Africa and beyond. As Goge Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations. Partnerships with the largest TV network in Africa, the NTA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Studio 24, Delta Airline, Toll Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogeafrica.tv. Goge Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down.
Do you have a job where you're going to? No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad, or even end up in prison.
My name is Yemi Adetunji, the COO downstream of NNPC. Ever since the closure of the borders, we have seen a marked reduction of about 10% in terms of the evacuation of what we call loadouts of PMS, which equates to about 6 million liters per day, essentially because of the border closure, because of certain aspects we've also done as NNPC, working with our sister organizations, sister agencies, Nigerian Customs, DPR, Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and other agencies, and also what we call Operation White, which is an intervention we have put in place to trace and track every molecule of petroleum products as they arrive in country through the vessels, as they move through the depots, and as they're evacuated with trucks out of the depots.
To the old school. Everybody love me when I do what I do. Cause when I come through, I got the power of cool. The power of cool.
What we are really cultivating here is a better future for all Nigerian women. And it's not always easy. Panadol Extra relieves headache, backache, joint pain, toothache, and menstrual pain. The pain is worth it.
This is Good Morning Nigeria. Impact of waste to wealth and focus as stakeholders advocate a paradigm shift for this sector. Chimobi Walter Inaji has the rest on our business news segment.
As ways of ending the perennial problems occasioned by unemployment of youths, experts advocate more enlightenment on the gains of entrepreneurship. One area identified by them is turning waste to wealth. Some of the respondents note that the waste management industry can employ more than 40% of the unemployed if adequate attention is placed on it by the teeming unemployed youths.
Government that waste is actually a big source of wealth. We generate more than maybe 500,000 tons of waste per year. Humongous amount of waste. This is wealth. This is money. Every aspect of it. Whether I want to talk of plastic, waste wood, waste food, waste water, tires, waste oil.
Stakeholders have advocated an increased participation of women in meaningful economic activities of the country as a way of attaining financial stability and strengthening the nation's economy. They were speaking against the backdrop of the research carried out by the World Bank on the participation rate of women in economic activities. They noted that women contribute greatly to nation building and development, hence the need to empower them financially.
The research says participation in economic activity. We have a stereotype in this part of the world. We think that jobs are what government provides, and then you go there and you get paid and you go home. That was ages ago. Nowadays, employment is what you generate, what you create for yourself. So women in particular have a lot to contribute in the economy. The participation rates that the World Bank has been speaking about are actually in economic participation, not necessarily in politics.
For more on business news, here is a graphic representation of trading figures at the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Yeah, thank you, Chimobi. We appreciate that business package. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and next is Newspaper Review.
Thanks for joining us on Newspaper Review this Tuesday morning. I'll begin the review with the Daily Trust newspaper. Just below the masthead, you see, despite 36 mining licenses, 10,000 megawatt coal for power capacity idle. You'll find that story on page 20. Why we have not rescued Leah Sharibu and others. That's coming from the Defense Headquarters. That story is on page 3. Reasons we waded into Ganduje Sanusi feud. That is attributed to Adamu Fika, and you find that on page 4. The headlines on the Daily Trust newspaper: FG uncertain on January border reopening, with Rwanda joint patrol with neighbors yet to start. And the picture story there, you see people wait to withdraw money from ATMs at a bank in Oshodi, Lagos yesterday. You see quite a long queue there. And at the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, PDP moves to broker peace between Dixon and Wiki. That's on page 13. Kalu to spend Christmas in prison as court rejects bail application. That story is on page 8. And court sentences 5 to death, 3 to jail over Khashoggi's murder. That's the journalist that was killed in Turkey. You find that story on page 36. Kieran?
All right, now let's turn to the Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, federal government's revenue dipped by 388 billion naira in November, says CBN. The story can be captured on page 27. There are other stories here. Elders Committee can't annul Kano New Emirates, says government. Elders Committee can't annul Kano New Emirates, says government. It's on page 2. Now, oil wells. PDP steps in as wicked Dixon rift deepens. That's on page 7. No date yet for border reopening, says the federal government. This is on page 30 of the Punch newspaper. Now, the lead story on the Punch newspaper this morning: APC rejects Obaseki's call to dissolve peace panel. With 2 riders, governor not ready for true reconciliation, party leader, and the NWC resolves round only Oshomole, says Obaseki. All right, now there's a photo story here where there was an attack here in Abuja. Well, it has a line here at the bottom of the photo story. Thugs attack Abuja anti-government protest, brutalize activists. And of course, below that, we have other 20 stories. 2 burnt to death in Jos, Abuja multiple crash. That's on page 5. $600 million steel plant in Kaduna will boost economy, according to AIG. It's on page 11. And stories at the bottom of the Punch newspaper: El-Rufai, military, others meet over southern Kaduna security. It's on page 7. The president besieged hospital as 19 die in Katsina crash. That's on page 43. And fraudster poses as my wife, buys on credit, says Osun deputy governor. That's an interesting story there. It's on page 9, and that's where you get details of that. Jimmy, you can see that we are experiencing some crashes this festive period. Resident besieged hospital as 19 die in Katsina crash. And of course, we have also read a story where 2 were burnt to death in Jos, Abuja multiple crash.
The rush, the speed, to go, just drop the passengers, return and take more passengers, I think it's causing a lot of problem, actually.
We have, handled a lot of topics here concerning our drive culture in this country, especially during a youth period like this. And on several occasions, the Federal Safety Corps has taken some measures, even holding meetings with tanker drivers, holding meetings with other drivers, going to all motor parks across the country to sensitize the drivers on the need to at least be properly regulated while you are on the road. And as it is now, we've not had what's happening in perhaps in other parts of the, especially the southeast part of the country or southwest,
where the traffic is much.
Exactly, exactly. That's one story that you read on the Daily Trust newspaper about the uncertainty on the opening of
the border,
of the border,
because they say joint patrol with neighbors is yet to start.
Yeah, so you recall that there was a tripartite meeting, that culminated in an agreement to have joint patrol team that would be between Nigeria, Niger, and Benin Republic. And we are still waiting to see the outcome of that arrangement, because if that tripartite team has been put together, then it does mean that there could be reasons to reopen the border. But from what has played out so far, it does seem that there are some areas that the 3 countries have not agreed.
Gray areas, actually.
And that, of course, led to the continuous closure of the border. Because in the real sense of it, if Nigeria reopens the border without achieving the objective for which it was closed in the first place, the whole thing would have become a ruse. So something has to be achieved, from that action. That's why that's the reason of that uncertainty from my understanding.
One thing that beats me is why not adhering to the agreement first before December, because the rush is quite sincere and very, very serious in the border areas, because I think the closure has sort of helped bring down the crime rate during this festive period.
It has indeed. Never before the festive period, we've had some quiet, when it comes to kidnapping, the space of kidnapping across the country, and even banditry. Right, so that has really solved the problem. And of course, on the rice issue, now we're beginning to be self-sufficient, in terms of everybody now eats local rice.
This Christmas is for Nigerian rice, all the way.
All right, let's go to the editorials this morning. It's taken from the Punch newspaper. It's actually on page 20 of the Punch newspaper. It's convictions of corrupt former African leaders. But you'll find this editorial very interesting because it is focusing on conviction of corrupt former African leaders. And let's take some of this piece here. It's no longer business as usual in some African countries, as they now subject their former leaders to the judicial process or being held to account for their stewardship. Sudan joined this growing list recently when it convicted and sentenced its former president Omar Bashir to 2 years imprisonment. He faced corruption and money laundering charges following the discovery of cash in excess of $130 million in his residence. Now, the editorial also tried to highlight the fact that the development continued in Egypt, where Mubarak has just served out his prison term, having been convicted of corruption. Of course, Hisn Habre, former president of Chad, was sentenced to life imprisonment with charges that bordered on rape, sexual slavery, and crime against humanity. All right, and it goes on and on. The trial in Senegal, it says the trial in Senegal where he was exiled was unique because it was supported by the African Union. Now, African Union supporting the incarceration of a former African leader. So the editorial is interested in getting African leaders, former African leaders, who championed the cause of mismanagement, of their countries, and it brought it down to Nigerian situation, right? And he was trying to point out the fact that it was only Sani Abacha is the only leader to whom stolen funds have been traced so far.
So far.
Yes, and he's trying to. The editor is trying to encourage the current administration, to see how we can also touch on all former leaders of the country to see how they can get some funds, out of them. So that's that's basically what the editorial is all about. Talking about African leaders, who actually did not do well in terms of development, or who also stashed away some funds, to foreign countries. Right.
Kieran, Africans are beginning to understand the fact that these leaders are not demigods, and they can be brought to account for what they've done. You remember the era of Seso Seko and all that, the amount of money that was stolen, But I think we're becoming aware of our rights the more.
All right, and that will be better for the development of the African continent, in one of the continents that, of course, is, of course, at the backseat of development. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we are going to be starting our conversation in the next segment of the program. For now, let's take a short break.
They swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people. They traded their freedom, comfortable homes, and mortgaged their lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, fearless, loyal, and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. Put on the remembrance emblem with pride to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
It is the lead we should take to honor the memory of the gallant hearts of young men who paid the supreme sacrifice to keep the country united.
President Muhammadu Buhari enjoins all ministries, parastatals, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to these accounts. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Meet the dreamer. Meet the stylish. Meet the bold. Meet the inquisitive. Meet the warrior. Meet the master. Meet the realist. The challenge is coming. Unity Challenge. Power, development, and peace. Coming soon.
What we are really cultivating here is a better future for all Nigerian women, and it's not always easy. Panadol Extra relieves headache, backache, joint pain, toothache, and menstrual pain. The pain is worth it.
And to kickstart our discussion on safety and security during the Yuletide, let's take this background report from Aisha Ubali.
Christmas is a significant day for most Christians all over the world, and in less than 24 hours, Nigerians will be joining the rest of the world to commemorate the birthday of Jesus Christ. This season is characterized with movement of people from one place to another, especially to the hinterlands. For many, it's an opportunity to bond and as well as reconnect with loved ones. With such activities comes its peculiarities, which center on security. These usually pose as a challenge for road users in public places and sometimes residential areas. As it is, government has put up plans of ensuring that the festive period becomes memorable for everyone by providing adequate security of lives and property at all levels. Ahead of this year's Christmas, the Nigerian Police Force has made arrangements to ensure adequate surveillance through the Yuletide. Similarly, the Federal Road Safety Corps has provided mobile courts nationwide to prosecute traffic violators. Some Nigerians have also advised people to avoid trouble-prone areas.
As we all know that security is everybody's business, but there are people who are actually employed to do that job of security. My advice is to them is to make sure that law and order is maintained. Areas which we know they are having challenges, security personnel should put more concentration on those areas.
So people have to be very, very vigilant. And then there's also the case of one chance and all of this. You want to go into a car, you have to watch very carefully before you go in. And
in whatever they do, they should be able to monitor the activities of these citizens, especially now that it's Christmas, as in Christmas season is approaching.
As I lock my gate at around 8 o'clock, and we are like 4 people in the environment. Everybody has the key, and we don't give the key to people that are strangers. We pay security bill, and we have a lookout. So whenever we are coming at a particular time, we have a whistle. So if any strange thing happening, we blow the whistle to alert the security agent.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we will be looking at security and safety during the Yuletide. An expert in this field will be talking more on this shortly.
And joining us this morning to discuss the topic, first we have the Force PRO, Frank Mba. Frank is a regular on our show here when we talk about security. Frank, good morning and welcome.
Good morning to Nigerians and Merry Christmas.
All right, and of course we have FRSC Zonal Commanding Officer, Zone RS7, that's Abuja and Niger States. His name is Omar Guntu Ibrahim. Omar Ibrahim, it's a pleasure to have you this morning.
Yeah, good morning, Nigerians.
Also in the Abuja studio is Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management. Good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
And compliments of the season, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, and thank you.
So we'll begin with Federal Road Safety Corps, Omar Guntu Ibrahim. Usually at this time of the year, there are a lot of, there are a lot of officers dispatched to our highways to ensure safety of lives and property. What are you putting in place beginning with this Yuletide period now?
Good morning, Nigerians. Federal Receptico has made a sort of a gamut of preparations for the Yuletide. First of it, we have started with the FCT. We notice we have numerous number of our operatives in the junctions everywhere to man and caution the motorists. While in the highway, we have about 52 corridors that we are manning, and we have 16 camps that we are right now operating. From the camps, we make instant deployment to where there is need.
Okay, now are you talking about 52 points? Is it within your own jurisdiction, let's say about FCT and the Niger State, or are you talking about the entire nation?
The entire nation.
The entire nation.
Yes, we have 16 camps where we deployed large number of staff, so that when it happens, when we notice that there is a gridlock or hold up anywhere within the corridor, we quickly move them from there to that place, in addition to what we have in the state government and the unit commands.
Yeah. From the reports we read this morning, one of our national dailies, we already, seen some crashes taking place between yesterday, 2 days ago, and just yesterday. And knowing the Nigerians' drive culture, such incidents may also be taking place in other parts of the country. Well, is there any measure that you have put in place for the purposes of rescuing victims on the highways this period?
Yes, the most important measures that we have taken is we have improved our ambulance points. All the ambulance points that we have across the country, we have improved them, and we have deployment on those areas. And for instant reach of the victims, because when it happens, it's the rescue time. Within that, we have reduced it to 15 minutes. And it is within 15 minutes that we are sure of getting the location of accident. Where we cannot reach within that period, then we call the nearest command. The nearest command will do it for us.
Okay, Mr. Frank Mba, can you talk about the synergy you have with other security agencies during this period, and how many police officers have been put out there to stop crime and criminality from happening?
Thank you very much for having me. That's a very special season. It's a time when security agents worldwide work very hard round the clock. There's parts of the sacrifices we make when others are celebrating, when others are expected to be at the moon having fun. That is when we're expected to actually be on the road and be up and doing, making sure that we're able to provide a safe, conducive, crime-free and violence-free environment for citizens to be able to actually celebrate and enjoy the festivities. And that's exactly what we'll be doing this period. We have made a lot of strategic deployments. We are paying very special attention to the shopping malls at this period in the build-up to the Christmas and the New Year. There will be a lot of shopping activities going on. And we also understand that at this period, some criminal elements also want to take advantage of the very busy nature of the shopping environment to actually try to commit crime. So we are paying very special attention to shopping malls and markets. We're paying very special attention to banking zones, and some parts of the cities are actually designated as banking zones. You have a large concentration of financial institutions domiciled in those axes, and we are paying very special attention to those axes. We are also paying very special attention to our places of worship, because there are lots of activities going on there. Remember, beyond the celebratory component of Christmas, it has also got a religious and spiritual dimension, and so we are not unaware of that. So we're paying very special attention to the places of worship. We are also paying special attention to residential areas. Over time, we know very well from the pattern of movement around the season that in major cities like Lagos, Abuja, Kano, Kaduna, and so many other big cities within the country, what you notice is a migratory tendency or a movement tendency that take people away from the cosmopolitan areas to the rural areas. A lot of people will be moving to their country homes to reunite with their families, to attend so many other social functions that are intricately tied to the season. And so what happens is the residential areas in the urban areas, in the cities, are usually lonely, with fewer people, and that makes those areas vulnerable. So we are intensifying both vehicular and foot patrols around those areas. We've also issued out security tips to residents and to Nigerians, and we'll be discussing that if time permits in this platform. And then lastly, perhaps not lastly, we're also paying very special attention to the motorparks, the airports, and then the train stations. Our railway system is beginning to work, and so we have made full deployment at the railway stations. In fact, some of the railway stations we've deployed the sniffer dogs to the railway stations. It's very key to us with the kind of confidence we are building in our rail system. If we allow any security breach, it will simply crash the confidence of people in the rail system. So the Railway Police Command has got very clear directive from IGP Mohammed Abubakar Adamu to provide watertight security at the railway stations. And so we're also taking very special attention of that. And then finally, our highways. That's very key to us. And there are some corridors that are receiving even greater and more intensive attention. So the Abuja-Kaduna Highway, the Lafia, Kwanga Makurdi Highway, the Abuja-Lokoja axis, the Okene-Bini axis, the Lagos-Shagamu, Ore, Bini, Asaba axis, and so many other highways are receiving very intensive surveillance. And we expect that with the strategies we've put in place, we are consciously optimistic that at the end of the day, Nigerians will be able to have a Yuletide devoid of any major security breach.
Okay, why do you think there's an increase, in the security challenges, more especially during this time?
Well, it's not always the case that there are increase in crimes as people actually believe. You see, everywhere in the world, increase in commercial and social activities tend to also lead to increase marginally in criminal activities because they are intricately tied. And that's why you find out that bigger cities, mega cities worldwide, whether you're talking of London, whether you're talking of New York, whether you're talking of Shanghai, the bigger the cities, the more you tend to have incidences or issues of crime because you have a larger population base with a huge financial, commercial, all manners of economic, industrial, social activities going on. So, but when you go to cities that are much more quiet, then crime rate tend to be lower because the population is lower. Social and economic and industrial activities are also lower. So at this time of the year, there are increase in economic, social activities, a lot of movement. People are coming in from the diasporans, if there's any word like that, are coming back home.
I like that.
those of us in Nigeria, within the city, we are also heading back to the villages. A lot of purchases are going on. A lot of activities are going on. You don't expect the criminals to just sit back idly. A lot of criminals are strategic thinkers. Don't take them for granted. They latch out to every opportunity. They are consciously looking out for openings, for opportunities, for vulnerabilities to actually take advantage of. So at this period, if you go to the shopping mall, for example, shopping malls that usually will have an average of 50 shoppers, 50 persons coming in per day, could probably be recording as many as 400 persons coming in. So if you're a pickpocketer, if you're someone that is good at pickpocketing, I mean, the climate, the environment is a bit more suitable for your trades, and you want to try. And so what we do is we put measures in place to also frustrate that. We're aware of that, and we have very elaborate, comprehensive security architecture, both undercover, both covert and overt, that we've put in place to actually deal with some of these challenges.
All right, thank you very much indeed for that implicit analysis, on the strategies we put in place. We are going to specifics, much later with respect to the agency collaboration in this effort, because the police can't just do that alone. Let's bring in Kabir Adamu here. Kabir, in our new segment, the acting director Defense Information, Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, gave Nigerians an information saying that the military has been able to neutralize some bandits, and of course arrested about 389 of them in a fierce battle. That's the language he used. That's my concern here, which simply means that the banditry is also part of the security problems that we're having at the moment, especially this Yota period where activities have heightened. Every facet of our human life, is bubbling. And everybody wants to play a role, just like Frank Abato, that the criminals are also strategists themselves. Right. So, how do you look at the entire security architecture of the country within this period, having heard from Frank Mba?
Yeah, unfortunately, the criminals don't go on holiday. They, like he rightly said, they are strategists. They take advantage of opportunities. So the current challenges that we have are not likely to, lie low, as it were, during the Yuletide season. And I'll quickly run through these challenges. Number one on the top of the list is terrorism, and that's more specific to the northeast of the country. And to that extent, I would like to mention a campaign that especially ISWAP, that is Islamic State in West Africa province, has started to avenge the death of its leader, al-Baghdadi. The campaign is supposed to, run across all their affiliates, including the Islamic State in West Africa province. And in the last few days, weeks, we've seen an increase in the ferocity of the attacks affecting especially Yobe State in particular, mainly because of the active presence of the military in the Borno and the Lake Chad Basin. So that has pushed them towards Yobe State. So that's for terrorism. Can they expand outside the northeast? There is a huge possibility there, because the Yuletide season, it's a period for them to gain advantage, show presence, and win some form of, as it were, new recruits. Already I've seen on their social media platforms, indication that they are aware Christmas is in the corner and that they can be active. So terrorism, number one. Number two, banditry, which is very important, and that's the point you made. So where is banditry present in Nigeria? Mainly in the northwestern states and some part of north central states, places like Benue, Taraba, parts of Plateau, Niger, Kaduna, especially around Birnin-Gwari, Zamfara, Katsina, parts of Sokoto, and of course even in some southern states where in the past we've had cases of especially the farmer-herder violence, which is to an extent associated with banditry. And while speaking about banditry, we also need to speak about kidnapping. because unfortunately, when the bandits attack, they kidnap. Like we've seen in almost all the states. So that threat is there. In spite of what the defense headquarters has mentioned, that threat is there. It's very active in the rural areas. And of course, when you are traveling between locations, sometimes they block the highways and, abduct the victims that they stop. When they go to rural communities, they steal, they, rape, unfortunately. So gender-based violence is also an aspect. Criminality. And all its facets, highway robbery, which has been spoken extensively by my two fellow discussants, associated with kidnapping as well, because when highway robbery occurs, sometimes kidnapping comes up, and then break-ins, when they go to homes, burglary, steal. When you park your vehicle, they break into the vehicle, steal, which is unfortunately quite rampant in Abuja here. And several other aspects of criminality. Inter-community violence, it's also something that is quite present, especially in places where there is political tension, if I use that word. And to that extent, places like Edo State, Kano State comes to my mind. There are a lot of, potential for that kind of violence. The case of Sowore, just yesterday in Abuja, we saw an attempt by two groups really to, represent their case. That's not likely to go away during the Yuletide season, where that potential is there. Gang violence. Lagos has been quite active, unfortunately, in that regard. Starting from, for some time now, we've seen two gang, groups, as it were, cult groups, quite active in Lagos, where they've been, as it were, carrying out reprisal attacks between themselves. And whenever ordinary Nigerians like you and I come between them, we're unfortunately victims. So what am I saying in essence? There are threats within our environment. How can those threats become risks to us? How vulnerable are we to those threats? That is what each and every individual and corporate organization needs to do. If you have the capability or capacity to do a threat assessment, do that threat assessment as an individual. In other words, ask yourself in this Yuletide season, all of these threat factors that I've mentioned and several others that I haven't mentioned, how can they affect you? That is the risk to you. Now, if you are domiciled in a location, let's say you are living in Abuja, what are the threat environments within Abuja? How can they affect you during the Yuletide season? Are you going to church to, to worship during the Yuletide season? What are the vulnerabilities specific to that church? Is there likely to be an attack? What measures have that church put in place? What measures have the public security institutions like the police, civil defense, and the others put in place to protect that church? So every individual should ask that question. If you are a corporate organization, business, or to an extent, whatever corporate organization you are, ask yourself that question, conduct an assessment. These threats that I've mentioned, what kind of risk do they present to you? If the risks are high, what measures have you taken in place to bring that risk? Then the most important one, which has been spoken to at length here, is when you're moving from one location to another location. That, in my view, and based on what I do, has the highest risk, travel-related risks. So what are the vulnerabilities? What kind of risk are you likely to encounter? What measures have you put in place to lower that risk? Because that, I think, is the message I would want Nigerians to take during this Yuletide season. What can you do to lower your risk? The threats are there. We cannot deny the fact. The public security organizations have put in place measures to reduce those threats. What can we as Nigerians do to also lower that risk? If in your assessment you've not lowered the risk, then unfortunately, as it were, you have to take that decision. Do I travel or do I stay at home? If the risk is high, my advice to every Nigerian, please stay at home. Your life and safety is more important than anything you are going to do in the village.
Okay, talking about the risks and we ensuring that we are safe. Frank Uba talked about the criminals being very intelligent people. And I would like to come to the area where you said you saw some of the updates of the ISWAP and also on Facebook. Are we helping matters by posting our movement on Facebook? Like I'm traveling now, social media, Twitter and all, we'll just post where we are, where we're moving from one point to the other. Do you think it helps? in any way to secure our lives?
Unfortunately, no. A lot of social engineering and other data mining, of criminals and other, unsavory characters, they do it on social media. So social media is one of them. If you are on Facebook, you post you are traveling. That means two things. The potential criminal knows your home is vulnerable. Yes. Second point, he also knows you are traveling point A to B. If you are going by road, he can stop you on the road and do whatever he wants. So social media is a huge vulnerability that Nigerians are yet to even understand. The convergence between technology and physical activities, most of us are not thinking about that. How can, for instance, somebody take over control of our phones and know the kind of discussions we're having, monies we're posting and things like that? It's a threat that is currently with us, and unfortunately we're not even aware of that. So yes, social media is a veritable asset for would-be criminals to gain as much information. Even things like your dustbins, when you buy stuff or the kind of food you eat, it allows the criminal to develop a profile of who you are, and then of course he would know whether you have money or not. If every day he sees those expensive cereals and all those expensive things in your dustbin, then already he has an idea of what kind of person you are. So yes, social media and several other aspects of how we live our lives allow criminals to build a profile of who we are, and then they can now use that to target
us. So they profile us?
Of course they do. They do. The point is, most Nigerians unfortunately are not aware of this. We have a culture of showing off, unfortunately. And that culture of showing off. In security, we have this simple, which is not a very good philosophy, but you push the threat to your neighbor. You deflect the threat as much as possible. Where you attract attention to yourself, then you are likely to be the first target before your neighbor, unfortunately.
Yes, in fact, at the very beginning, when the kidnapping became the order of the day, one of the most lucrative businesses, among those persons who are criminally minded, they profile you from Facebook, right? They tend to make an assessment of who you are and be able to track you, all those your activities that you post out to track you. Perhaps in weddings or any other social gatherings, and be able to even identify you as an individual and make their proper assessment before they strike. Now, back to the issue of vehicular movements this period, which of course when Kabir was talking about high risk areas, it's actually traveling by road. And I want to bring in Umar Guntu Ibrahim once more. Going by our drive culture, many Nigerian road users are not going to adhere to the rules and regulations, guiding highways. And we would like to find out if there are measures that you've put in place to checkmate such persons, perhaps to curb, accidents. I've argued on some occasions, that the act establishing FRSC, why didn't it empower FRSC to, for instance, ticket anybody who goes wrong on the highway immediately, and even withdraw his or her license? And that's done elsewhere globally. Once somebody's license could be seized for 6 months or 1 year,